Hello and welcome back to In the Footsteps of the Maccabees. In this video we will explore the site of a Jewish village from the Second Temple period that was discovered here in Modi'in, and then we'll talk about the Maccabean Revolt, why it started and how things developed. So this site was explored excavated in 2000 and 2001 under the leadership of archaeologists Alexander On and Shlomit Wexler Bedolach. And right away there was this excitement that perhaps they found the ancient town of Modi'in. And part of the support for this was that the local Arabs used to call this spot El Umdan, the mother of pillars. And it was thought that Umdan preserved the name Modi'in. I'm sitting now in the largest room that was found in the village, and on the floor you could see stumps of pillars that were buried in the ground. So perhaps that explains the name pillars. But it's believed that this room was a Beit Knesset, actually, a synagogue. And the pillars held a large roof, and there was seating all around. There's actually a mikveh just on the other side, which would be appropriate next to a synagogue. It's undergone a lot of restoration to make it more accessible. They put shade on top. But this is a very important, exciting find. And every year on Friday night of Hanukkah, there's a minyan out here in the synagogue to sort of keep it alive. So the introduction to our story starts when the Persian Empire controlled the land of Israel. And they let Jews come back to Judea, rebuild the temple, and although they didn't have sovereignty, they were allowed to worship as they pleased. And this policy continued even after the conquests of Alexander the Great, who conquered the entire Persian Empire. He brought Hellenistic culture and introduced it to the entire region, but there was no religious coercion. And different Jews interacted with this new culture around them in different ways. And the policy continued throughout the rule of the Ptolemaic Greek Empire based in Egypt, and then after the Seleucid Greek Empire came to control the country with their capital in Syria. And the policy of not interfering with worship continued until the days of Antiochus IV, already 150 years after Alexander the Great. And this King Antiochus, also known as Antiochus Epiphanes, he had a failed military campaign in Egypt. He was stopped by the Roman Republic from achieving his objectives, and he was very frustrated and angry, and he passed back through the land of Israel and decided that he was going to forcibly accelerate the process of Hellenization of the population. He outlawed Jewish practices and enforced the worship of his gods, even in the temple. And so he put up an idol of Zeus in the Beit HaMikdash. And the truth is that the Jews in positions of power in Jerusalem at the time, like the high priest Menelaus, they were actually in favor of this Hellenizing agenda. Perhaps it was even them that egged him on to accelerate Hellenization of the country. They wanted to see Judea become part of this wider culture. They thought it would bring economic benefits and social, political benefits. So they were all for it. And if there were people in Jerusalem that wanted to resist, they weren't in any position of power to do so or to change anything. But out here in the countryside, the majority were very religious and traditional Jews who were appalled at what was happening. And very soon, this enforcement started to reach them as well. Seleucid soldiers would go out to all the villages, and the story is told in Sefer Maccabees, the first book of Maccabees, of something that happened here in Modi'in. A Seleucid soldier came, built an altar, set up an idol, and basically approached an important person in the town who was Mattathias, who was Kohen, and said, Mattathias, you need to sacrifice to this god. And Mattathias refused to do so. So then another Jew steps forth to make the sacrifice on his behalf. So Mattathias sprang forth, he killed that Jew, and then he also killed the Seleucid soldier who was trying to enforce that worship. And then, followed by his 5 sons, they fled. They fled to the mountains north of Jerusalem and started to gather a following. And they tried to enforce Jewish customs and Jewish law wherever they could. They would raid the towns, make sure that all the baby boys were circumcised and that no one was interfering with keeping Judaism. And they would attack any Seleucid soldiers or any Jews that would come in their way. And this is how Mattathias sparked a revolt which snowballed into bigger things and bigger battles later. I'm standing on the central pathway of the village. On the side are sort of small little dwellings, and all along the way there's these pictures that let you know what you're looking at. There's a wine press, there's a mosaic floor for stomping on the grapes, and then chambers for the wine to collect into. Here's a picture to see what it would look like.